What's that? First, the ITIN number, and what's the difference between a social security number and that for non-citizens?
An ITIN is basically an individual taxpayer number that sort of functions as an alternative to using a social security number. So for a non-U.S. citizen who does not have residency in the United States, who wants access to the banking system, they will need something called an ITIN. This is completely remote. You don't have to come to the U.S. As I mentioned, you don't have to get rid of your passport or send your passport in. It's something that can be done completely outside the United States. Now, as far as opening the bank accounts, in most cases, you will have to take a short trip to the U.S. To open the accounts if you want to bank with traditional banks, which we really recommend. Some people will try to do it themselves to save a few $100, and it doesn't really make sense to save a couple $100 and then do something wrong. So you can have an address mismatch. You cannot properly put the registered agent down. You can miss filing deadlines. You not understand what the filing obligations are with the state of Wyoming. There are any number of things that basically can cause an LLC to get frozen or get shut down. The fintechs, most of them work with the exception of Wise, work exclusively with businesses. But any of the traditional bank accounts in the U.S. credit unions typically will open both personal and business accounts for customers.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for watching our episodes on the Jerz way. My name is Gabby Jerz, and we have a new member in this podcast. Her name is Katufa, and today we're going to be speaking about, tell us Jerz.
Today we are going to talk about banking in the United States. We get a lot of people asking us about how to open accounts. If you're a non-U.S. citizen, what is an ITIN? And just the general process for establishing credit in the United States.
Let's get started with the very first question. What's that? First, the ITIN number, and what's the difference between a social security number and that for non-citizens?
Great question. So an ITIN is basically an individual taxpayer number that sort of functions as an alternative to using a social security number. So for a non-U.S. citizen who does not have residency in the United States, who wants access to the banking system, they will need something called an ITIN. And generally speaking, it is something that is a little bit complicated to get. The general IRS procedure involves sending your passport or having the passport certified by an individual. It's very complicated. And we've actually come up with a process that allows us to certify the passport remotely. So you're not going to have to send your passport in. We're able to do it over a short video call. And with that, it should take about 6 to 8 weeks, although the IRS has been a little bit delayed lately. You'll have the ITIN. And this is the number that allows you to come to the U.S. and to actually open up a bank account and begin that process of establishing credit.
So what you do, that's the reason why right now we are in the United States. Right now we are recording this in Miami because our clients are not U.S. citizens, and this information is going to be provided for all people that wants to bring their exposure to the U.S. market. So based on this experience for non-U.S. citizens that wants to create credit, that implements also taxes on this. The ITIN provides this. Tell me a little bit more about the tax filing.
No, so the ITIN in and of itself has no tax consequences. So you don't have to worry if you get this number that you're going to suddenly have a tax liability. The IRS looks at your overall situation. Most of the clients who come to us have some sort of business in the United States. So they have an LLC, they have an EIN, which is the tax number for the business, for the LLC. The ITIN is a personal tax number, but the number in and of itself does not have any tax consequences. Now, if you have liability in the U.S., of course, your tax liability, you're going to have to pay tax in the U.S. But for most foreign nationals who are not U.S. residents, they don't have something called effectively connective income, which we'll talk about later in this podcast. They're not going to have any tax obligations. And the ITIN just becomes an informational number that would appear both on your LLC's tax return And it's the number the banks use to sort of put you into their system, put you into the banking system, and then eventually you can also use that number with the banks to begin to establish credit.
So another question that most of people wonder, right, with all the policies of immigration that's going on right now, do we need to have ties to the U.S. to get those numbers, the ITIN and EIN number? It is possible to do it like abroad, not necessarily to come to the U.S.?
Yeah, so the process is that we utilize is completely remote. You don't have to come to the U.S. As I mentioned, you don't have to get rid of your passports or send your passport in. It's something that can be done completely outside the United States. Now, as far as opening the bank accounts, in most cases, you will have to take a short trip to the U.S. To open the accounts if you want to bank with traditional banks, which we really recommend. The other option is to set up through fintech banks. These are banks like Mercury, Relay, Wise, and these fintechs have their place, but I would not rely on using the fintechs as your only bank. One of the reasons we're here is as Gabby sort of touched on, we were using one of the fintech banks, and we ran into a problem. And I deal with U.S. banking every day. I consider myself an expert on this. And even I'm not immune to these problems with the fintechs. In fact, I'll tell the story because I think it's like a good lesson for the listeners out there. And this is the basic reason why you don't want to rely solely on fintechs. What happened, we were using one of the fintechs, and I like the fintechs for certain things. They have a very good user interface. They have a good platform. They allow you to have multiple debit cards, which a lot of times the traditional banks don't allow. And so we started using one of the fintechs for our business. And I wasn't following my own advice. Generally, I say don't leave more than $10,000 in a fintech. Always just use it to move money through and out. But it just so happened I was traveling a lot and I lost sort of paying attention to that. And the balance accumulated. I don't know the exact amount, but 60, 70,000, something like that in the account. And our attorney, Araceli, who is in Paraguay, who does the residencies there, she has a debit card with this fintech. And one of the ways we get money to Paraguay is she goes and withdraws it at the ATM. Never had any issues. So one day, a few months ago, she goes to withdraw the money and the card doesn't work. So she writes me frantically on WhatsApp, says, "Hey, Jerz, the card's not working. What's up?" Like, that's interesting. There's a lot of money in that account. So I log on to the account and zero balance. There's nothing there. And I'm like, shit, what's going on? So
yeah,
the big problem with the fintech is that there's no way to get a hold of them. The chat feature doesn't work. You send them emails, they don't respond. So I spent the better part of the day on the phone trying to get a hold of them. They don't answer. It's sort of this endless loop where nobody knows what's happening.
And the problem of the fintech is that once they delivered a check with those funds, you have to come to the U.S. to deliver those funds. You're unable to receive those checks abroad or to deposit that unless the entity has that open. Like it has to be name to name, but it has to be inside of the U.S. or any bank that actually allows to receive those checks.
Exactly. So I'll speed up the story, but basically what happened was eventually we get somebody at this fintech who can help. And they said, "Hey, we sent you an email a few months ago. Did you get it?" Like, what email? I look back, no email. Eventually they say, look in the junk. One email 2 months ago, no notification on the platform, no multiple emails. And they wanted to do some verification, which we could have very easily done.
And the important message they send is, hey, we have to tell you something.
Yeah, exactly.
It was not like verification needed. It was not a title that you pay attention. You just simply receive that ton of messages that simply says, just you have a message from Relay.
Yeah, it just looked like the regular junk mail that they
Correct.
send every day. So the bottom line was we didn't do this verification in time because we didn't know about it. They didn't notify us properly, and the account had been closed. So once an account gets closed with a fintech, it's basically impossible to reopen it. And the process with the fintechs is they'll send you a check, as Gabby mentioned. So a check for $60,000, $70,000 is not the easiest thing to cash, especially when you're based primarily outside the U.S.
And another problem that we are not mentioning is the blacklist of fintech bank accounts. Directly, your business entity and your name goes to the blacklist where you're not going to be open to open a bank account that is related with their system of regularization, or what is the name, Jerz?
What happens is the fintechs aren't really a bank in and of themselves. They use an underlying bank. And there are a couple of these banks, but they basically work with all of the different fintechs. So once you get banned or have your account closed with one of the fintechs, you're basically done at all of them.
But it's a regular, like a law that they have, like a certain amount of millions of dollars that this fintech.
The FDIC insurance you're talking about?
Yes, that's correct. That's the one that they share all that data information. And once you try to open in different fintech bank accounts, it's going to be impossible because you're now on that data list that you're not going to be able to open the bank account.
No, the FDIC insurance is something else. That has to do with if the bank or the fintech becomes insolvent, the federal government actually guarantees it. So one of the nice things, fintechs are like banks in that regard. You're not going to lose your money.
No.
You'll get it back, but it's a pain in the ass.
No, I'm saying about the blacklist.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the actual name of that blacklist is.
Well, when it happens and many people try to open a fintech bank account and they say it's not going to be open, then when they try in another fintech bank account, it says that the same issue because they were banned from another platform. That's right now that all the fintech bank accounts are handling. It's a data list that when they were denied or their bank account was shut in one fintech, they are going to be doing the same in the other fintechs.
Yeah, I think both the fintechs and traditional banks, I'm not exactly sure what the list is called, but they operate similar lists. And it's very problematic if you have your account shut down with one bank or one fintech, because you'll suddenly find yourself shut out from either fintech banking or traditional banking. So it's not a good thing to happen.
Well, it's the same what's going on right now with many people that came under Biden's administration and they set up their business. And most of them now in the traditional system also got shut down their bank accounts because of many problems.
What happened under the Biden administration, that a lot of that was crypto related. So in Silicon Valley, especially, there were a lot of startups, a lot of crypto related companies. And Elizabeth Warren and the Biden administration made this concerted effort to go after these individuals. So suddenly, the Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, tech people, engineers, the founders of the company found themselves getting letters from Chase, Bank of America, saying, hey, your account's been shut down. And the reason was because they were participating or involved with these crypto related activities, which is just ridiculous. Now, supposedly the new administration is more crypto friendly, and some of these people are getting back into the banking system, but the point sort of remains that whatever the activity is, a government or somebody can all of a sudden say, hey, this is something we don't like, and they can just arbitrarily shut your accounts down.
Yeah, but also that's why it's important to educate our audience to say what's a fintech and what's traditional and why at the end of the day you are using that. So fintech, what for people that they don't know is just that online banking that you just sign up online. Well, many people, even from traditional banking, they don't know what is that.
Well, yeah. So a fintech isn't really a bank. A fintech is basically the interface, the forward-facing system that you see, and that's what they're selling. The actual bank behind a fintech is a traditional bank, but customers think, hey, Relay, Mercury. No, Relay, Mercury, Wise, they aren't banks. They're utilizing another bank in the background. And what they're basically doing is selling their platform to that bank. But the problem with the fintechs is those underlying banks, because they're not the ones onboarding customers or doing any of this stuff, they're notorious for freezing accounts and really seizing funds and doing stuff that I consider very shady. As I said, fintechs have their place. I'm not completely bashing fintechs because they have great platforms and they definitely serve their purpose. But be careful how much money you're going to leave in any fintech at one time.
And at the end of the day, you have to be very careful because they are the ones innovative to use Bitcoin, stable coins, and all of this. Eventually, they're going to be able to allow to business entities to get subscriptions under this other sort of payments and use other assets. So the idea is that right now we're in an interesting phase of banking, adaptation, innovation, that once you are getting an account shut down, you might not be able to get under these innovative companies, but it doesn't mean there's an open door opportunity to know what's next and try to take advantage of those innovative systems.
Yeah, for example, one thing that I'm very excited about, Stripe, which, as many of you know, is a payment processor, basically. They're actually becoming a bank or a fintech bank. It's not really clear which one yet. But what they announced a few months back is their new platform is not only going to allow you to receive money from your customers, but you'll be able to keep your money there. You'll be able to get a debit card. You'll be able to send it to wallets. It'll be a crypto-friendly platform. How that sort of shakes out and what it becomes, we don't know. We don't have the exact details yet because it hasn't been released in full. But it's something I personally am very excited about. I see a lot of potential if Stripe goes in that direction, and then maybe you're a consultant, you're somebody who's running an online business. You won't even have to deal so much with these other fintechs or even with the traditional banks. You'll be able to leave everything within that Stripe.
So let's go now with the second topic, which is structuring a U.S. business, and also to know how to start with it.
Okay.
So we can first speak about what's the difference between all the states, because all your audience comes always with a question, why not Wyoming or Florida? Why is always Wyoming, not other states? So tell us about those differences in those states and the tax benefits that we have.
Okay, so many of you want to or have some sort of U.S. legal entity business structure. And I would say it's actually important. It's much more difficult to get into the U.S. banking system if you're just like a private person with no business in the U.S., no residency in the U.S., because to the banks, it's like, well, why am I going to loan money or give credit to this person who has no ties to the U.S.? So one thing that people do, whether you have a business or not, is create an LLC, create the structure to give the justification to the banks to actually open the accounts. And the best structure for most people, for most of you, is going to be a Wyoming LLC. Why Wyoming? It's very cheap state to set up. It's a very fast process. They allow online registration. The renewals are inexpensive. A lot of the other states have some sort of franchise tax or some sort of tax that needs to be paid on an annual basis. Many of the other states have state tax, which is another consideration because the rules about whether you'll owe state tax are not necessarily the same as federal tax. So there's situations in certain states, you form an LLC there, and although you're still exempt from the federal taxation because it's an exempt entity, you're not necessarily exempt from the state taxation. So for those reasons, and the other one is Wyoming's just easy to work with. A lot of times something will come up and one of the LLCs we've set up in Wyoming, the customer has a problem or needs an apostle, needs a document. I can pick up the phone, I can call somebody at the Secretary of State's office in Wyoming, and they'll pick up on the first or second ring. I can't say that about any other state. A good example, Delaware, which is a state that was much better and is still very popular. People, what about Delaware? We formed a LLC in Delaware against my advice a couple of months ago for a client. And it was an absolute nightmare. Nothing's done online. They have to send the filing out. We paid for the expedited 24-hour, and it was weeks going back and forth with emails and trying to get a hold of somebody on the phone because they screwed up and hadn't sent the physical copy of the articles. And that's just the kind of problem that you see with other states that you just don't have with Wyoming.
And what are the common misconceptions about Wyoming or when foreigners are set up their business entities here? What are the common mistakes?
During the process of setting up the LLC?
Yeah.
Well, I would say some people will try to do it themselves to save a few $100s, and it doesn't really make sense to save a couple $100s and then do something wrong. So you can have an address mismatch. You cannot properly put the registered agent down. You can miss filing deadlines. You cannot understand what the filing obligations are with the state of Wyoming. There are any number of things that basically can cause the LLC to get frozen or get shut down. And then when that happens, it's like this avalanche because your banks, business contracts, everything is associated with the LLC. And suddenly one after the other, things just get shut down, all because you tried to do something yourself to save a couple $100. It makes absolutely no sense in my opinion.
I always listen that always their clients ask you this question. Well, Jerz, what makes you different to set up the business entity with you and not with another agent?
Well, it's a good question. I do get that question
very
a lot.
often.
The biggest difference is this. We provide a personal touch. Yes, there are 100, probably 1,000 other companies out there that can set up Wyoming LLCs, but not many of them will give you their WhatsApp number. Not many of them will actually pick up the phone, answer the messages. And that's what we do. We make sure everything stays compliant. And if you have questions or you need help, we're there for you. We're not just getting your money and opening up the LLC. We stay with you for the process. And then the other big difference, most of those companies open LLCs. That's it. On the other hand, we're not selling LLCs. We're selling your whole structure. So we will tax optimize for you. We will help you with filings. We will make sure the LLC works with your tax residency. We're looking at your whole international sovereign structure. And there are not too many companies out there doing that. Most of them are simply selling you an LLC. But an LLC in and of itself isn't your complete setup. So you need to keep that in mind when you're choosing who you want to work with.
So in your package includes all the business structure from the LLC, EIN number, ITIN number. But what if any of that is completed, or how does it work?
So we sell packages. If somebody wants just a basic LLC, we'll do that. But we'll also set up an LLC as part of a tax structure that includes a Paraguay residency, that includes Panamanian banking. We'll set you up with an ITIN so you can get access to the traditional banks in the U.S. Like, for example, a lot of the companies that set up LLCs, they might work with Mercury, they might work with Relay and say, hey, we'll help you with the LLC and the fintech. But as I mentioned, it's not a wise decision to rely 100% on just a fintech. So we'll make sure that you're actually set up, that your structure actually works on an international level, and the structure just makes sense. One thing I think a lot of people in the space try to make everything cookie cutter. It's like, okay, an LLC, a fintech, an ITIN, and they might sell these different parts, but they don't sort of put the whole thing together. And what we really do that sets us apart is we look at your entire setup and make sure that entire setup makes sense for your goals and for what you're trying to do.
And is clean and transparent under the law.
And it's clean.
Very
absolutely,
important.
100%.
I love to mention that in every podcast, that everything is clean and transparent. Because when things are not right, there's no point even to be speaking about that. And that's what most of people in these gurus online that we see online, they make people not to trust what is actually the information that is real. And because they are not transparent, then becomes all this amount of problems that we're seeing.
And it's, I always say there's a very fine line between tax optimization, which is perfectly legal, and tax fraud, which can have serious consequences, fines. They can take your business. They can throw you in jail even. So with all of this stuff, we're not talking about committing tax fraud. We're talking about optimizing your structure. And the good thing for a lot of the non-U.S. folks who run businesses who don't live in the U.S., it's very possible to legally structure your life so you're not paying tax. So you're at that 0%. But the structure itself has to be set up properly.
And it's strong.
And strong. And it has to be, it can't be some arbitrary pie in the sky thing. It has to actually work.
Before jumping to the next subject, I want to say that when I started to do my first business online, it was awful because my business was weak. I was pretending to receive payments in crypto. I was pretending to jump into one to another thing. And that shut me down bank accounts, fintech bank accounts. I had numerous problems with employees because I didn't know even how to deliver the money I was receiving from the clients. And plus, my LLC was delivered in Delaware, Jerz. I don't know if I ever told you about that.
Yeah, I remember.
My Delaware LLC, an agent that made it that set up my mailing address in Colombia, where in Colombia we don't receive mailing address. All of this, the tax filing, the tax returns, all that was horrible for me. And I got many issues. I got many problems as a business entrepreneur going in Latin America or even in Europe. Whoever is listening to me relate to this, because then when you want to receive a payment, we don't know that you can do it with a Stripe from the U.S. instead of a Stripe Atlas that costs more money. I mean, there are a bunch of possibilities that we have abroad, but at the same time, we think that is not the right way. Or even the e-commerce, when I started with this, the small things. And I remember when I was speaking back in the days in Colombia with expats or entrepreneurs, how to open bank accounts, they said, oh no, I have just my passport. So that's one of the things or the situations that us, when we're not from strong countries, put more complications on the way.
And a big one, I get this a lot. Somebody will have set up a LLC with a internet provider, somebody, super, super low cost. And they'll get to me and they'll be like, oh, you have to file tax forms every year? Nobody ever told me that. And that's the kind of thing where a seemingly, just misstep or innocent, you don't know because it's new stuff. So a lot of people don't know. But if you don't file these 2 forms annually, 5472, 1120, it doesn't matter if you've never used your LLC. It doesn't matter if there's no activity, no revenue, nothing. The IRS can and often will come in and charge you $25,000 just because you didn't file a form that costs, a couple $100 to get somebody to file that form for you. But it isn't for most people, it isn't even saving that couple $100, $200-300. It's they didn't know they needed to do it. So that's why it's really important to work with somebody who gives you the whole picture and make sure you're compliant, not just when you open the company, but ongoing.
And just to add, this is for everyone that is trying to also work remotely, also that has business entities. Like there's a lot of people doing money on TikTok. There's a lot of people doing online on Facebook ads. A lot of people selling courses. It's very important to know that at the same time, when they're going to be doing this structure, they need to know how to prevent the closing, the freezing, and all that, which is what I'm going to be asking you now. What has changed in 2025 that it's different from years ago? The physical addresses in all of this, what has changed in the banking?
I would say that the compliance has gotten in the last year a lot more strict. And so we're seeing it's much more difficult to open accounts, even the fintech accounts, and it's much more difficult to keep the accounts open. So a lot of people who've had accounts for years suddenly find themselves getting these letters that the accounts are getting shut down. What are the big issues? The biggest one we see is the physical address. So for many years, typically, when you open up an LLC in the U.S., you get a registered agent address. This is an address registered to the business, and it's where legal notifications go. So for many, many years, you could use this address for banking. And it was something that was either given to you as part of the LLC or it was very inexpensive. You could rent a virtual mailbox from any time or one of these virtual mailbox providers for a few dollars a month. And it was actually in 2024, so about a year ago, they passed some new regulations and the bank said, including the fintechs, you can no longer use registered addresses. So for foreign operators of LLCs, almost none of them had physical addresses in the U.S. So many, many people have gotten their accounts shut down or in the process of getting their accounts shut down because they don't have a physical address. And a physical address means just that. It's an actual address. It can be an office. It can be a house, but it has to be physical. It has to actually exist. And it can only have like a limited number of people associated with it, as opposed to a virtual address. Some of these had thousands, if not more, of people using the same address. So we do have a physical address solution that we offer. Right now it's in Wyoming. We're looking at offering it in a few other states, but right now it's just Wyoming. And it is an address. You can receive mail. We'll forward the mail to you. But the most important thing and what differentiates this service from, say, an anytime mailbox is that, or First Base or any of these other companies that offer it, is that we guarantee that our address will pass compliance with the bank because it's compliant.
And what banks are working with business entities?
Pretty much all of them. With the fintechs, most of them work with the exception of Wise, work exclusively with businesses. But any of the traditional bank accounts in the U.S. or credit unions typically will open both personal and business accounts for customers.
And can you open a U.S. bank account with passport?
You can, but at the traditional banks, you're going to need a passport. You're going to need a ITIN letter. And you're going to need that physical address that I just talked about.
Let's repeat one more time that people can just write it down. So, passport,
ITIN letter, physical address and proof of that physical address. So that can be several things. It can be a lease agreement sometimes. It can be a utility bill, but they're specific about the type of utility bill. Most banks won't accept cell phone bills, so it has to be something like an electric bill, a gas bill, an internet bill, one of those. What else? If you're opening a business account, you're going to need the articles of organization from the state, and you're going to need your EIN letter, which again is the tax number from the business.
Do you also help with this, right? The appointment?
We do. So if a client wants to open up traditional bank accounts in the U.S., we can set you up with the appointments and sort of walk you through the process. So you'll have success in opening the accounts. A lot of the success or failure, believe it or not, simply has to do with the information you put on the application. This applies to both traditional banks and fintechs. I can't tell you how many clients have repeatedly been denied for Relay, for Mercury, or for a traditional bank. They come to us and we say, well, this is the reason you're getting denied, and either do it for them or walk the client through the process, and the client gets approved, because banks are very specific about what they'll accept and what they will not accept. And we've been doing this for a long time, and we stay on top of the trends, because what worked 6 months ago probably won't work today. And we understand that, and we follow that because we're working on this on a day-by-day basis. And we will give you the best shot of getting that account, getting it approved, and then keeping it open, which is another important aspect of this.
And also that not all your client handles different volumes. It's not the same a client that's going to be starting for $3,000 a month, $5,000 a month, to someone that already set up the structures in Europe, and they're going to start receiving $50,000 in the first month.
Exactly. It's that kind of stuff's very important, and that also will greatly influence not only the bank but the banker and how you go about opening the account. Because if you just follow sort of a cookie cutter process and you open up a basic account, and then all of a sudden your second month you're sending hundreds of thousands of dollars to the bank, you're likely going to find yourself with problems.
So now let's go with compliance addresses. You were touching up a little bit about the PO box that happened in 2025 are no longer required. Let us know more about why was this reason for the banks to say no to the PO boxes?
So banks, this is all started sort of after 2001. And it's gotten stricter and stricter within the financial crisis in 2008 and continues. Banks started something called KYC compliance, Know Your Customer compliance. And this is sort of the latest part of that, is that the banks say we have to know where you physically live, who you are. And for a long time, you could use IDs, and the banks were okay with that because they didn't necessarily need to know where you physically lived. Now, of course, the problem is the banks are saying we need to know physically, a physical address associated with you. And of course, if it's a PO box, if it's a shared sort of mailbox, they don't know where you actually are. And so that's where this concept of physical address came from. And the result is no PO box, no registered agent address. It has to be a real address.
So how do you stay in compliant if you're not in the U.S.? How you can maintain a clean filing and tax report? Do you also offer that?
We do. So we, depending on what you're doing, like if you're if you're running an LLC, as I mentioned, you have to file 2 forms annually, 1120, 5472. That is a service we offer. We file for our clients. That's the biggest one to stay compliant. The other thing that I always talk to clients a lot about, in most cases, a foreign-owned LLC is it's an exempt entity, okay? Which means the LLC in and of itself is not subject to U.S. tax. So income that comes into the LLC flows through, it's a pass-through, through the LLC to you personally. And then you pay tax on the LLC's income on a personal level, which is great if you have a residency in a place like Paraguay, a place like Panama that's territorial tax. You can achieve zero tax. The exception to that is something called effectively connected income. And most clients don't understand what that is. The IRS has made it a very abstract concept. So it's not black and white. It's a very gray area. I like to explain it in simple terms, which is more or less if you have operations, if you're physically performing work in the U.S., the IRS is going to classify that as effectively connected income. If you're doing 100% of your work outside of the U.S. and you don't have any physical operation that you control in the U.S., it's going to be an exempt LLC and you're not going to be subject to U.S. tax.
I'm going to resume on that aspect because it's very complex what you're speaking, that it takes time to the audience to go through all that. And I'm pretty sure they might have more questions about it, Jerz. But just to make sure, the U.S. LLC can be added as a setup for people who has Paraguay, Panama. And is that a conflict with the U.S.? Is what you're explaining, but what
do you mean by conflict with the U.S.?
I mean that could bring a problem in case that you have the setup in Panama, Paraguay, and you have the setup also the U.S. LLC in the U.S.
Well, assuming we're not talking about U.S. citizens, because all of this stuff is going to be slightly different for U.S. citizens. The U.S. does not have issue with you having a tax residency in one of these territorial tax countries. That's not going to be an issue at all.
Okay. Because the good question about that is because we go to another part of the questions I have for you, which is the growth. Okay. Let's say that the person is ready. Let's set up that they have this successful business. They are selling e-commerce. They're doing up to 1 million per month, which is very common nowadays. So how this U.S. LLC ITIN provides them access to Stripe, being able to charge their clients in the U.S. How is that process? Explain like that's a structure, and that way they can see it.
So Stripe is probably the easiest payment platform or gateway to set up. Really, all you need is that U.S. bank account. It can be a fintech account or it can be a traditional bank account. And once you have that account, so setting up the account, the bank account is the first part of the process. After you have that, you go to Stripe's website and you basically give your information and register the account number and routing number from that account that you have.
But if they don't want to be bothered by doing that, you also provide assistance with it.
We do. So we can, in addition to helping you set up the bank account, we can set up your Stripe account as well.
Okay, what about building credit in the U.S.? It's good how they leverage once they start receiving the income of their clients and they're welcoming all their business to the Americas.
So we get this a lot because the next thing after you set up the U.S. banking is usually people want access to U.S. credit, whether it's large credit lines, which are fairly easy to set up as a foreigner, or access to miles and points because the U.S. is so far ahead of other countries in being able to earn those miles and points. There are two sort of paths I'll talk about. The easiest expedited path, if you have an ITIN, you have a registered business, the LLC, and you have a pre-existing relationship with American Express, it's generally very easy Amex has something called global transfer, which just allows you to transfer your Amex card from whatever country you're from to the US. So that's going to be the fastest, easiest way if you have that pre-existing relationship with Amex. If you don't have that and you're starting from zero, you're going to have to follow a harder approach, but it's still very doable. Basically, when you open up these traditional bank accounts in the US, Chase, Bank of America, you can request credit cards. And at first, they'll give you either very small lines, $300, $500, or it'll be a secured card, which basically means you deposit money. I would recommend depositing as much as you can, and they'll issue you a credit line based on that deposit. Then once you have either those secured or small limit cards, use them constantly.
Yeah.
Use pay, multiple times per month.
I'm very happy actually that Stripe US, they have something called Stripe Capital that a few months ago I knew just about that because thought I was eligible for it. But it's related to also the funding, the loans that US provides to entrepreneurs. So have you seen that your client has been receiving these loans, the fundings because of these transactions?
Exactly. So once you start building that activity, and if you've had these accounts for a while, you'll receive offers for capital loans. Mercury does it, Stripe does it, Amex does it. Most of the traditional banks do it. And the crazy thing is these loans can be substantial. I've worked with clients who've gotten $1 million plus within, say, 1 to 2 years, just by showing the business activity. But back to sort of with the cards. So the basic process after you start using these cards, you'll request after a few months a credit limit increase. And then after, say, 4 to 6 months, you should be able to apply for other cards, Capital One, things like that. And then if you keep with the process, usually 9 to 12 months, we're working with you, where we've sent letters on your behalf to the credit bureaus to get you locked into the credit system. Clients can typically start receiving the cards they actually want, which are things like the Chase Sapphire Reserve, the Amex Gold, where they can really start earning serious amounts of points.
And also, guys, you have to think about that for the business, because when you're running ads, the best way to be running ads is on credit cards.
Absolutely. So as an example, the Amex Gold gives you 4 times. The new they just released this in the last couple of days, or in the process of releasing it. The new Chase Sapphire Reserve business card supposedly has no cap. The Amex card's capped at $150 per year, and a lot of our e-commerce sellers meet that in a couple of days.
Yeah.
So this card's uncapped. So imagine you're running $1 million of ads a month, which a lot of e-commerce sellers achieve that. With this new Capital One card, I think it's 3x, so 3 times. They're earning 3 million points a month.
Yeah.
Just for using a card with the spend they already have. It's crazy.
And you provide.
And we can help get you into those ecosystems. As I said, it's a process. Don't think, unless you can do the global transfer from Amex, don't think, immediately you're going to come to us and we're going to be able to set you up with this. But you work with us over a year, it's very realistic. You can have access to all of this.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that valuable information. Now I'm going to just asking you final questions that we have received over social media. And one of the common questions that we received the last week, what is the big misconception or the myth people has when they are structuring a U.S. business as a foreigner?
Well, I think the biggest myth is that there's no compliance involved. That U.S. LLCs are so easy that they're just going to be able to set it up and never have to do anything again. Compared to most countries, the U.S. is easier. You don't need detailed accounting. The informational returns you file are just that. They're informational. They're not full tax returns. But there still are requirements. You have to file a couple forms annually. You have to do compliance with the state. You have to renew the LLC. And a lot of people don't realize that. It's low touch, but it's not zero touch.
Another personal question: what do you wish every entrepreneur, venture capitalist that they are listening to you right now, once they know all of this, you want them to know earlier when they started their setup and it's completely a mess?
Well, I would say, again, don't look at it as an individual piece. It's not just about banking. It's not just about the business structure. It's your overall setup. So I think a lot of people look at it as pieces as opposed to the entire piece as one. And a lot of really successful entrepreneurs that we work with, their setup's a mess because they didn't think of it from a broader perspective. And so now, they're doing hundreds of thousands of dollars a month as an e-commerce business, and they didn't think about this stuff from the beginning. It's a lot harder to make them compliant and to basically fix their non-functional setup. So we really need to look at from the beginning where you are, and then we need to look at where you want to go and create the structure, the totality that includes everything from banking, business structure, residency, citizenship. Make sure that all fits, not just with where you are now, but with where you're going.
Is this an advice for only people who are making money online, or is also for people who got physical businesses or looking also for the relocation entire, change their life 100 degrees?
We work with everybody. I would say it's probably easier somebody who is remote and has an online business, because those businesses are so flexible in where the person can be and whatnot. So, obviously if you have a restaurant somewhere or a physical business, it's more complicated because we need to consider that. So the location of the business can't change. And that can affect everything from structure to banking to where you need to physically live. So again, that's part of the broader conversation that we need to have about where you are and where you're going. Because in the case of the individual with the restaurant, he likely can't go anywhere. So we have to design a structure for him with that in mind.
Right. Yeah. And another question for you at the end: what are your final thoughts in this podcast? What is the best suggestion you can give to the people who are listening now and want to get started?
Well, since this podcast is ostensibly about banking, I'll make it about banking. I think the key is diversification. This podcast has been focused on U.S. banking, but it's important to diversify both in the U.S. and abroad. So I would highly encourage everybody to set up multiple bank accounts in multiple currencies in multiple countries. Back to the U.S. side, what does that mean? Can you have a fintech? Sure. Mercury account, Relay account, Wise account, they're all good accounts, but you shouldn't use them exclusively. Same goes for the traditional banks. With most of the traditional banks, it's gonna require a personal visit to the U.S. to open. There are some sort of backdoor ways we can open accounts remotely, like Chase, but it's very expensive because the process is actually you're supposed to go in person. And when we set up these trips for people where they come, we recommend opening both personal and business accounts at multiple banks, at least two. That way, if something happens to one of the accounts, you're not going to be shut down with your business. You have another option and you can keep going while you fix whatever that problem is with the account that has been frozen or shut down. Diversification is very important, and it's a piece of the puzzle that many people miss.
Perfect. So in this podcast, we spoke about the banking for business the creating, how to use the campaigns and businesses, like the creating the ITIN number. So also give me that brief summary that the clients or future clients that listen to this, they know what the structure means, what services we spoke, what would you offer?
Yes. So what somebody who wants to get into the U.S. system and build credit generally needs to take the following steps. First, they need to set up an LLC and get an EIN number, which again is the tax number for the LLC. That part of the process is very fast. LLCs take about 24 hours. The EIN number takes about 2 weeks. The next part of the process that's usually done concurrently with the setup of the LLC is the ITIN number. Those take 6-8 weeks. Right now, they're running more like 8-11 weeks because the IRS is understaffed right now and coming out of tax season. Once you have both the ITIN and the EIN and the LLC set up, 2-3 months down the road, banking. If you want to open up a fintech account, that's great. I would also highly recommend setting up traditional banks. We can assist you with that. We can assist you with the appointments, guide you through the entire process so you can open those 2-3 accounts, personal, business, and establish credit. For those who want to establish credit, we then can walk you through the process from the time you open up the account, get those first cards, 9-12 months into that second year where you can get the cards you want with the really good miles and points earnings and also just substantial lines of credit. We work with you through that entire process. The other thing, again, we've touched on this a few times, keep in mind once you have this set up, the ongoing compliance. So the ITIN letter, the ITIN number, you typically have to renew that one every 3 years. The LLC, starting in year 2, you have to file the 5472, 1120, 2 informational tax returns, and you need to renew the LLC. So those are the ongoing costs. In most cases, the U.S. banks don't have like annual fees. They usually, depending on the type of account, might have a small monthly fee. But there's no real ongoing compliance with the banks.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that beautiful summary because you said it better than I did in this time. And also the next episode, we want to speak about how to travel with your dog once you do the relocation and why she's here with me. Well, we don't do that, but it's part of our family. And we had this emergency situation coming to Miami, guys. But many people has been asking how we do that. Our dog is traveling more than 7 countries without any issue. So
yeah, I think it's been to even more than 7 countries at this point. A lot of people have asked us that. So we're gonna do a podcast about that, how to travel with your dog, and really show you how it is possible to live a nomadic life with your furry friend, so to speak.
I do apologize, guys.
She woke up. She knows we're talking about her.
Yes. We do apologize, guys, if you don't like dogs and you saw me with my doggy on the lap. I know many people don't like dogs or cats, and that's okay. But it was an emergency situation we had this weekend, and I don't have the heart to leave her alone in a hotel where you don't know what's going on in that hotel, right? So thank you so much, guys, for watching this episode. Remember, my name was Gabby and
I'm Jerz, and we are on all of the socials. TheJerzWay.com is our website, and we look at and respond to all inquiries on both the social channels, our email, website, WhatsApp. So you have any questions, comments, feel free to reach out to us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jerz, and thanks you so
Gabby.
much, guys. See you the next time.
See you the next time. Bye.